So my name is Michael Long. I'm a lead cyber adversarial engineer at a company called MITRE. MITRE is a nonprofit company that operates research centers on behalf of the government and serves in the public interest. I like to think I had a fairly typical early adulthood. When I finished up high school, I was attending college and I was working simultaneously. And it was those kinds of jobs that a lot of people get their start at. You know, it was food service, it was working in call centers. And I don't marginalize those jobs in the least. I gained some valuable life lessons from those experiences. But along the way, I knew I wanted to do more. There was nothing wrong with what I was doing, but I wanted to serve my country, and I knew I had some innate talent, and I wanted to get the skills and the experience to really apply that out in the field. So just by working through those startup jobs, that kind of set me on the course for looking for something greater, and the military was the path for me to do that. As far as kind of how I got into cybersecurity, really, I kind of got started by going way of the military. I was probably about 20 years old when I enlisted in the Army. At the time, I was really enthusiastic about getting out, trying to serve my country, while simultaneously working towards getting more rewarding, more impactful experience and skills. So originally, I tried to join the military as a, somewhere in the spectrum of cyber warfare. The problem is it didn't exist at the time. So while in the military, I basically started off in military intelligence and was simultaneously working on my bachelor's degree in information technology. Within a short period of time, a cyber operations specialist job position kind of opened up with the military and became accessible. So I seized that opportunity right away. I was in one of the earlier classes within the military for certifying cyber operations specialists. So that was kind of my entry point into cybersecurity. The military gave me the foundational skills and experience needed just to start doing cyber operations. And then from that point forward, excuse me, I was operational. I was supporting a spectrum of offensive and defensive cyber operations. And 10 years later in the military, I had a wealth of technical experience and some really enjoyable life experiences. And at that point, I transitioned out and I brought my skills to the private sector where I'm still applying them today. Skills that came easy. I think in general, some of the more hands-on skills tend to be a little intuitive. When I was first getting started, operating system administration was pretty straightforward. I found networking to be pretty straightforward because there's like hardware you can interact with. You've got terminals and screens. You can get real-time feedback. So a lot of that stuff came really easy. I think what was harder for me in the beginning was really programming and scripting. I'm one of those people that was never linguistically inclined. Like I took 4 years of Spanish in high school, and I really couldn't speak intelligently to you today. So that being said, I realized that programming is an immensely vital skill. It's getting to the point where to be effective as a cybersecurity engineer, you have to have some basic proficiency with programming and scripting. And I knew that early on. So I basically just forced myself to do it all the time. I just immersed myself in it. And after overcoming some of those initial barriers, I'm now at the point where programming in general is very seamless and easy for me. If you want to be a really, a strong cybersecurity engineer in any subdiscipline, there's three key areas. One is operating system administration. You got to kind of know how to interact with computers at a deeper level. The next is networking. You got to know how computers communicate and interact with across the network. And then the third is that programming and scripting that I kind of alluded to earlier. At a certain point, you're going to have to automate things. You're going to have to write programs to solve problems for which existing tools don't really deal with. So taking those three, it's operating system administration, networking, and programming. If you have those three, you'll have a really strong foundation to do nearly anything within cybersecurity. Fundamentally, to be really successful, you have to have a combination of strong written and verbal communication skills. And you have to be flexible to tailor it for different audiences. As a cybersecurity engineer, I know in my case, I interact with fellow engineers on a daily basis. And if you were to hear some of the sentences we say to each other in passing, it sound like a foreign language to, to outsiders. So you have to be prepared to speak at a very deep technical level with your fellow engineers. But within moments, you could be in a room with your executive leadership, whether it's your CIOs, maybe it's a project leader, maybe it's a general who's trying to make impactful cybersecurity decisions. When you get to that level, you have to communicate your technical subject matter in terms that they can understand and act on. I kind of recognized early on the importance of communication skills, and really what I try to do on a semi-regular basis is I like to try and write something, whether it's a white paper or a blog. I like to write something that you publish to the community, and then also present it. And between the two, I find it helps me keep my written and verbal communication skills sharp. It's a culture of information sharing in many cases. And I love reading different blog articles and research articles that people publish. And likewise, I feel obligated to take that information and share it with the community as well, because taken together, that's how we get better as a community. So some cool things about working in an offensive space, some cool things I experienced. One of the first things I had to learn was how do you deal with cybersecurity problems at scale? It's one thing to work in like a small or medium-sized organization. Maybe it's a network with like, somewhere between 100 and 500 nodes. When you're suddenly in an environment where you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of nodes or millions of connections per second, solving those problems at scale requires a different approach. And being able to learn how to do that can be really rewarding and impactful. When you figure out, how to deal with a million connections per second, you kind of feel like you could really do anything. And that's a really rewarding and interesting skill to kind of take with you. Separate from the offensive cyber operations space, you kind of have red teaming and penetration testing where you're trying to model those behaviors, to assess and improve cybersecurity. When you're doing that kind of work, that can be really exciting because in many cases you can speak more freely about it. You can take more action in response to the findings. And there's something really empowering about, as a red teamer, when you throw an exploit, when you make a computer behave in a way that was never anticipated, as a red teamer, that's really exciting. I love learning those unique ways of making computers doing things that you wouldn't have really intended. And then the flip side of that too is if you can effectively present that to the network owners and help them work towards fixing it, that's a really great cycle where you demonstrated a critical risk and you help them fix it. And that's something that's rewarding as a red teamer, but also simultaneously helps improve the network owners. One of the more public-facing projects I work on is MITRE attack evaluations. And that project basically entails modeling cyber adversary behaviors that have been observed in the wild against prominent cybersecurity solutions. So by doing that, I've been able to kind of apply my hands-on red team skills. In many cases, I reverse engineer adversary malware to learn how it works so that I can model those behaviors in the context of our evaluations. And then you run these evaluations in the room with the vendor. It's very collaborative. We sit in the room with some of the biggest security vendors you can imagine. And it's really rewarding to be able to model adversary techniques. And you might see that the vendor solution might not have been able to prevent it or detect it. And then by the end of that eval, they have those lessons learned where that they can make their solutions mitigate those threats. And it very realistically ties in to the behaviors we're seeing in the wild because in the grand scheme of things, our evaluations are based on adversary behavior that has been seen in the wild. So we're at a point now where there are so many different diverse devices in the enterprise that our traditional skills aren't really adequate to deal with securing those devices. So when it kind of comes to, well, what am I interested in learning these days? I want to start learning more about these devices that are kind of quickly, manifesting themselves in the enterprise. Chrome OS is a perfect example, and then operational technology, IoT devices, all of these new technologies are the ones that I'm really interested in learning more about. I would tell my younger self, pick a technology that you're really interested in and start becoming the master of it. And along the way, translate your activities into shareable products that you can give to the community. So it's not just a matter of being a master of a technology. Take that knowledge and turn it into a blog, turn it into a video, a conference presentation, or a tool. Take that and give it to the community, because that becomes something that you could point to demonstrate your expertise, and you're helping to further the industry as we go forward in cybersecurity.